I came in contact with the devotees first through the holy name, by hearing it in the musical hair, and from George Harrison, one of our commune members. He decided to become a monk. I was very impressed about that. And then my brother, eldest brother, who was living in Amsterdam at the time in a squat house, he was coming home in our family home and printing all the Hare Krishna mantras on a typewriter, and he started sticking them all over the place. So we started to become in contact with the Hare Krishna mantra, going to the toilet, going to the bathroom, wherever we were, Hare Krishna mantra was printed there. And so my second brother and me, we became influenced, and we liked these spiritual things. It was something different, a commitment we had basically together, that we will never become like our parents, because we saw that they were not happy and we wanted to do something different. So then when he finished school, he's 2 years older than me, my second brother, and then he finished school, he went to visit my eldest brother in Amsterdam, and he visited the temple, and he joined the temple. He didn't come back from the holiday, and there he was in 1970, initiated in Sweden, as far as I remember. Prabhupada was doing a tour all over Europe at that time. It's either 70 or 71 that he was initiated and became a Brahmin initiated. Also, his name is Angadas. He's meanwhile passed on just a few years ago. But so he brought me more close to Krishna consciousness. I was very close with my brother and really liked to follow whatever he was doing, because he was the more serious one. The eldest brother, he was very experimental, so he was usually getting himself in trouble. But the second one was more responsible. He joined, and then he was coming to visit me. Meanwhile, I was living outside, not with my family anymore. And he was bringing me books, posters, cassettes. In those days it was still cassette, all about Prabhupada. I had a big poster on my wall of Prabhupada and the Krishna book posters. And then I remember reading the books. At that time we were reading what was it, The Memory of the Yogi or something, some biography of the yogi, and Hermann Hesse, and Tolstoy was like for us something really spiritual, the Lord of the Rings. I remember sitting, reading that book, and he was bringing me more and more books. I said, yeah, but I have to first finish this one. So that's why it took me a little longer to get into the... But then I opened the books, they were all in English, first of all, and I just couldn't understand them. I couldn't understand the language, what it was transcendental, and all these words that they didn't register to me. I remember still traveling around with the Blue Krishna book trilogy, and I knew it's spiritual. And wherever I would go for holiday, I would always bring these blue Krishna books, just the color of it and the pictures. It was, for me, something spiritual. I needed to have it with me, but I never read it. I couldn't read it somehow. But then when my brother brought the first Isopanishad in Dutch, he had translated it together with Jagadev, who was the first devotee that I met, or that devotee that was in our commune that was going to be a monk. So that was the brother of Hare Krishna Das, Jagadev, and they were together translating the Isopanishad into Dutch. So when I started reading that, it completely convinced me, this is it. At the same time, I wasn't ready to join at that time, and I visited the temple a few times, just for a visit to my brother. I still remember him coming because he was a brahmachari, and they told us that there was no contact between women and men. And I found that very intriguing. So I still remember that on purpose I embraced him and I kissed him, because I knew it wasn't allowed. But it was my brother, so somehow they kind of tolerated. But I still also remember that he wasn't allowed to talk to me. There was some other brahmachari who was probably in charge or something, that was talking to us. Me and my girlfriend, we were visiting the temple, and after a little talk, they got us to do some devotional service. There was in the Betanienstraat, there was this little corner with a tap and a stone floor and huge pots that we got to wash. That was very good for us. They said it's purifying, it's devotional service for Krishna. And then everybody disappeared into the ceiling, because that I didn't know at that time, but later we understood that was the Brahmachari ashram. It was like the attic. You couldn't stand up there, but after the Sunday feast, they all disappeared into there. And we were washing the pots. And after some time, we just had enough of it. There was cold water, no soap, there was some scrub brushes. It was like really difficult. So we just said, maybe we should just run away. So that was my first devotional service. I ran away from the temple. And we just went back home, forgot about it. But then the second time he visited me, and he said Prabhupada was going to visit. That was in 1972 for the installation of Lord Jagannath. And he said, you come and see the pure devotee, it will change your life. You'll never be the same. Just a few minutes of association with a pure devotee. And it sounded so spiritual. So my parents and me, we went to visit, we went to Amsterdam from Breda. We were living in Breda at the time, to visit the pure devotee in Amsterdam. And it was so packed. And also the father of Prema Siddhi, my present husband, he was there also because he was a photographer. So he was just roaming around the city looking for pictures to make. And he saw this crowd of people trying to get into the Betanienstraat building. It was nicely painted, everything pink and blue, and so very attractive in one sense. So he also saw Prabhupada. But then it was quite an experience because Prabhupada was very sober and stern and very chastising, and we had no idea what's going on. We were all there packed up. That's why I'm thinking of this light. This is how my spiritual life started, with big lights, television lights on our heads, and we were all packed into this small hall. So it was like a temple room hall, and then in the front it was the altar. They had a little bit higher. It was kind of a stage with the altar, and that was where the fire yagya was going to happen. Prabhupada realized there was nothing organized properly. There was no bathing bowls for Jagannath, so they had to quickly arrange things, and it was all not done nicely. And later we read what all happened, but at that time I didn't realize that. I just saw that this spiritual master is very, very stern. And for myself, my experience was that spiritual life is very serious, because in those days spiritual life was a little bit like hip, another thing to do. When you're a hippie, you do spiritual things, and you smoke and you burn incense, these kind of things, and you read some semi-spiritual books, you do some yoga. And then there was the Guru Maharaj. He was also preaching at that time. And my eldest brother, so after he moved on, that's what he told me. He said, oh, he moved on from Krishna consciousness. He found something different, and there was the Guru Maharaj, and they were doing satsang and all these spiritual words they were doing. And he was opening the third eye. He would somehow enlighten you, and then you were liberated. And I thought, there was no principles at all. You didn't have to follow any principles. You just got your third eye opened, and you were liberated. So it sounded to me much easier. And this Guru Maharaj, he was a little boy. He had always big smile on all the posters you saw all over the town. Big posters of Guru Maharaj with a big smile on his face. So when I saw Prabhupada, I realized, wow, this is actual spiritual life. This is very serious. And my realization was at that time, say, well, that's not going to be for me this time. I'll do it in my next life, because meanwhile I understood there is a next life. And I thought, oh, I'll enjoy this lifetime, and then next life I will become serious, which actually was completely contradictory to my experience, because I was so miserable. I didn't think even happiness existed, that I shouldn't even try for happiness because it doesn't exist. So in that sense, it was quite crazy. But in the same time, because Prabhupada was so serious, it kind of made me step back. So when I came, then I left back to my hometown, but I meanwhile I had the books, I had the posters, I wanted to listen to the tapes, I tried to follow the principles a little bit, or sometimes I would go, if I would go to my friends, meet my friends in the bar or something, I would take it back to Godhead, or I would take a bead bag, which was, ordering your favorite drink and then having the BTG to read. It was a bit funny, this thing. But then my brother, he kept visiting, and he would teach me how to offer food. We became vegetarian, and I realized that actually by becoming vegetarian, the philosophy started to make sense. I started to make an altar in my house, and I don't know, I couldn't relate so much to the blue Krishna. But then my brother told me that actually you cannot accept Krishna if you don't first accept Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, he brought me his beautiful picture of Lord Chaitanya, how he's dancing, his robes are flowing, he has long hair, his golden complexion. And for me, it was very easy to fall in love with Lord Chaitanya. This was exactly the emblem of beauty in our days, long hair, golden complexion. So I put Lord Chaitanya on my altar as the main form, and I thought, okay, then this is completely bona fide. I started offering my food, and I had seen my brother do it with his Brahman thread. So I said, oh, okay, so I know how to do it. I took some string of a pack of incense, put it around my neck, and I started offering my food. And I remember still the first vegetarian Christmas dinner that I made in my student flat. I invited my parents, and the main dish was onion soup. The French onion soup, because it was vegetarian to my understanding. At that time I didn't realize that also onions are not allowed. So then that's basically how I met the devotees, until my brother was saying, well, what are you doing here? My friends weren't coming around so much because they were not allowed to smoke in my room, they were not allowed to take the drugs, and I was just talking about Krishna all the time, wanted them to hear the tapes and see the books, see the pictures. Sometimes they would come intoxicated and they would say, oh yeah, these pictures, they kind of appreciated it, but in a very wrong way. So he said, you're just sitting here waiting your friends to visit, and if you don't go to all these you don't go to the movies anymore, there's nothing really to do there. So he said, why don't you come? And so then when in 1974 they moved from the Betanienstraat, the whole temple, to the Herengracht, a nice, beautiful building. It used to be a hat factory. Was it a wig or a hat? I think it's a hat factory. So it was very nicely decorated, many floors. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 floors altogether. Big building. And my brother invited me to come and help to move the temple from. So I came in February, 3 or 4th of February. I still remember my girlfriend, we went for the weekend, we came to Amsterdam, she had friends there, and we would go out first one night. And then I didn't want to go anymore. I said, oh, I'm scared, why don't you come with me? She said, no, she said, you were going to visit the temple, not me. And so, because the doors were open, and if you come from the light, the inside of the building is very dark. So I said, oh my goodness. I didn't dare to go. I finished my last cigarette on the doorstep. And then she gave me a big push. She said, come on, just go. And she pushed me into the building. There I was. And then suddenly because there's the middle, there's a stairway going all the way up. And they heard, oh, Anga's sister has come. So later I realized they actually were cultivating me all this time. He was grooming me to become a devotee, which you don't realize when you're in this situation. Only later, when you start grooming other devotees to make them come to Krishna consciousness, you understand. So they were... But then after 2-3 days... Oh no, first thing I was asked to come to the temple president's office, this long room in the front. And he said, okay, you can stay for 1 week, and after you decide if you're going to stay or not. And I was a little surprised. I thought, well, I came here to do the devotees a favor, to help move for a few days, and I had no plans at all to join or anything. But then, so I thought, okay, I didn't say anything, which is very surprising because I used to be quite against any authority or figures. I would always be opposed to authority. But this time I didn't, so I just started doing some devotional service. One of the services was to take out the nails out of the stairs. There was lots of nails, and with every nail we would chant Hare Krishna, so all this. And the first class that I attended in the temple room was an Istagosti. And Istagosti, in those days, that meant you go through all the rules. And Nectar of Devotion has just come out. So then I basically heard all those 64 principles that you're supposed to follow as a devotee at the first meeting in the temple, which was so helpful for me, and all the things you're not supposed to do, you're supposed to do. And it just clicked. Within that week, well, since I was in the temple that week, I felt so at home. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else, really. It's like everything fell in place. The getting up early, the rituals in the morning, the songs that you just had to hear because there was no song books, or they actually didn't advise, because I said, you don't have a paper that I could follow the text, and I wanted to know what I was singing. Oh no, it's not necessary, you just listen and you'll figure it out little by little. But I felt so much at home that after 1 week, when I had to be called in the office again, I said, I want to stay. And I was really convinced I was at home, this is where I belonged, I didn't want to do anything else with my life. I finally found my place. And then I said, but yeah, I have my room in Breda, I didn't have any clothes. I had made one long dress, I remember, because I knew that you had to wear long dress, so I made one long dress. But it was not allowed to wear long dress. You have to wear a sari, but they didn't have any saris. Or they had these nylon things that was a reject from the London temple. So whatever they couldn't use, they sent it to Amsterdam. And it had some big holes like this, and there was no cholis, no petticoats, nothing. So I thought, I'm a seamstress, so I could sew a little bit. And so I thought I'll go home, arrange my stuff, say goodbye to my friends, and get rid of my things that I don't want. And I could sew some petticoats and some blouses and get some cloths for saris. I had a plan. And so I said, well, I need to go home and arrange my things. And the temple president at that time was Tulsidas. So he said, a big American Tulsidas. He said, so how long you need to do that? I said, well, I thought maybe 3 months or so. And so he said, no, you're not going anywhere. Because, I don't know, in those days, this 3 months, and probably it would have gone like this, Maya gets extra strong when you make a conviction to become a devotee, she'll test you extra. So he said, then he said, you're not going anywhere. And I said, okay. And so I left the office. And I thought, okay, then I'll just not go anywhere. But I remember still standing in the hall out of the office and think, what's wrong with me? How come I just follow this person's instruction without any opposition? But I was kind of agreed, okay, then I don't go. I'll just be a devotee. And then later he called me again. He said, okay, you can go, and your brother is coming. Oh no, he said, first of all, you leave after breakfast, and you have to be back before 10, same day. And your brother is coming with you. So there was a safeguard. So we went on the train. It takes 2 hours, I think, on the train. Get to my room, pack a few things that I could use. I think it was the spoons we were allowed to take, the tape recorder. I had a tape recorder. For the rest, a few things, and we had to buy a suitcase because I didn't have that. Everything in whatever fitted in the suitcase. And then I had to go to visit my parents. because the room was full of stuff. My father just helped me move there, painted the room and everything, against his desire, because he didn't like us to move out of the house. So then we went to drop off my bike. I think we took my bike even, yeah, we took the bike. Drop off the keys and say, look, the rent is not paid yet, and all the stuff is there. We need to vacate the room as soon as possible, but I'm joining the Hare Krishnas. After my brother just did, and they had lots of pain from that already. But we didn't care too much. We just left and let him deal with the rest. It took him a long time to overcome that pain, to just be dumped like this. I mean, yeah. But then later he saw that we were happy, so he kind of adjusted his plans for us, as parents have to do. So basically that's how things went. And I was a devotee. And that was 74 February. Then I remember once we went back to Breda, there was a program, we had school programs we used to do. Jai Gopal was there, some devotees would do kirtan, we had popcorn, we do a little preaching, a little lecture and kirtan and distribute prasadam. So I asked my school, my old school, it was a school for small children, kindergarten children, that I was trained for to be a teacher. So we went back to that school. I asked if we could come and visit. And they had their program in the aula, it's the downstairs hall, where you're allowed to smoke, because in the other rooms, in the classrooms, it wasn't allowed, only the teachers were allowed somehow. But then downstairs it was allowed. And then one of my friends, he said, oh, it must be so difficult for you to see us all smoking and you're not smoking. And I was observing them, and I thought, what are they doing? They kind of have this stick with fire. They put it in their mouth and it lights up. They're actually inhaling fire. And I had no clue that I couldn't imagine ever have done this. It was such a cut in my life that I really came back home to be a devotee and see them doing this. I thought, what are they doing? So I told her, not ever in my life I will ever do such a thing again. I just couldn't even imagine having done that. And that was like 3 months in being a devotee, or trying to be a devotee. So that was, and then in 74, same year, in June, Prabhupada was visiting. First he visited Paris, so he was doing a European tour again. And just recently I saw a picture of Prabhupada standing in the airport in line to the check-in line. There was a few businessmen with their suits and their briefcases, and then Srila Prabhupada in his dhoti and his chadar, and he had this little white suitcase. He was checking in the airport, in Frankfurt airport. And it was the 16th, no, it must have been Paris, and it was the 16th of June, and that same day, so when Prabhupada arrived from Paris to Frankfurt, we met him in the airport, and we had brought the Vyasasam from Amsterdam to the airport, because the Schloss Rettershof was just newly rented place, actually, it was a rented place. So they didn't have a Vyasasam yet, so we brought ours, which was a new Vyasasam. We brought it to the Frankfurt, to the airport first. So when we received Srila Prabhupada, and for me it was a very special arrangement, because I would clean the temple room in Amsterdam, and then when I finished cleaning, I would sit next to Prabhupada's Vyasasana. It was like soft velvet, so I'd lean a little bit to the Vyasasana like this and chant my rounds. And I would feel so close to Prabhupada. A picture of Prabhupada was there, and like he was giving me shelter. So then when I saw Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana in the airport, at that time, my picture was started to moving, and I felt so much strong this relationship with Prabhupada as being my father. I felt so safe, and I said, finally, I found my father, and he's going to save me. I'm safe now. I completely felt at home with Prabhupada. Then after that they brought the Vyasasan to the Slottsrättershof, and also during the initiation Fire Yagya, the Vyasasan was outside and Prabhupada was giving initiations, which was about 50 devotees. In my idea it was like 100. We had a big circle all around and everybody was sitting there, and I didn't have there was no bhakti leader, or there was no guidance so much. So I knew I was supposed to be initiated, because I already thought 3 months before that I was going to get initiated. But in those days, it was not something you announced. You kind of find out on the day. But yeah, I was quite convinced that I was being initiated. So nobody said anything. I saw the big circle. I didn't know where I'm supposed to. So I just took a carton plate. There was all the plates and bananas and neck beads sitting around. So just sat next to a plate. And there was someone behind me to put my neck beads on, because that also you're supposed to do during the yagya. And I just sat and watched the whole thing. And Prabhupada was very sober again. So that's what makes me think that this sober mood of Prabhupada, that's continued in my life, seeing Prabhupada very sober. And he was correcting every devotee that was called. But they started calling the devotees by city. And because we are Amsterdam, we were the first. But I didn't realize that. So they called Vasutama, at that time he was there, and maybe another devotee, Lalita Kund, but she wasn't allowed to be there because her parents were looking for her. So she was in hiding. And I didn't realize, they didn't call me, and they went to all the other cities, and I just sitting patiently waiting and studying every devotee that was being corrected, because everyone was paying dandavats in those days, and you were not supposed to pay dandavats straight to Srila Prabhupada, and also not horizontal to Srila Prabhupada. You had to do it diagonally. So a little side, diagonally. So every time they were doing it wrong, Prabhupada corrected them, they had to do it better, and I was studying, I didn't want to make any mistakes. Then the regulator principles, it wasn't just no meat, no gambling, no intoxication. No, it had to be very elaborate. No meat, no fish, no eggs, no coffee, no tea, no gambling, mental speculation, frivolous sports. And so they were more elaborate. And Prabhupada, every time they didn't say it fully, they were corrected, they had to do it again. So I was studying and studying. I didn't realize I wasn't called at all until somebody behind me, and it was a devotee. At that time he was called Vidanga, and he was living outside. He was a grihastha, he had family. And in those days, if you live outside, you're on the fringe. Basically, you're not really a devotee, but yeah, he had a family to maintain. So in nowadays, that's quite a normal position to be in. But he noticed it, so he must have gone to Satsarup Maharaj, who was Prabhupada's secretary, and then he was the one to put my neck beads on also. And then suddenly, all the way in the end, I was called. But I didn't realize it at all. I was just patiently waiting. I thought my turn will come. And then, but apparently what happened, we changed temple president meanwhile. So it was Tulsidas had left, and then somebody else was between. Then there was Prithu. And he was always calling me Nanda Devi. My name, my legal name is Nanya. And he was calling me Nanda, so I thought, oh, he's just flattering me a little bit. So he didn't think, he thought I was initiated. So that's why the misunderstanding. So I was somehow on the list, maybe for second or whatever. But anyway, it came okay. Prabhupada called me, or they called me, and I came, paid my dandavats, nice